It's time again for El Chessico, El Clasico of chess. World's numbers 1 and 2, Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura, are playing against each other in the finals of the Freestyle chess tournament in Paris, which is taking place this week. And now Hikaru and Magnus, they have played so many times against each other, but frankly speaking, I don't recall that many games they played in freestyle chess. Only in the Weissenhaus tournament in February, which was the kickoff event from this freestyle chess tour. And freestyle chess, if you are not familiar with it, well, look at the starting position. That speaks for itself. The white and black pieces have been shuffled on the first and last rank. So this is why the top players like it. There's no opening theory, and it's time to really create a nice new game of chess. And well, Magnus is playing with the white pieces. Time control is 90 minutes for the whole game, 30 seconds increment per move. Let's see what the players have in store for us, and I can guarantee some really exciting games. So make sure to watch from beginning till the end, and in the meantime, you can also subscribe to this channel. Thanks for doing so. Here we go. Magnus plays a 1c4. Well, you can say this is like an English opening, but of course it's a different story. Well, the only thing is that, well, the knight on b1 and the bishop on c1, they are actually on their initial squares. Black copies white's first move with c5, knight c3, the knight comes into play, knight c6, knight f3, and black plays here the move e5 to sort of create a nice grip on the center. The pawn on d4 has been, the d4 square has been neutralized by this pawn, but Magnus got some very interesting brainwave here, and comes up here with a stunning, really stunning pawn sacrifice. It's the move b4, and here you can imagine that Nakamura was caught by surprise. What's the idea of this move? Well, if you do take with a c pawn, white's idea had been to go knight e5. The knight is beautifully placed in the center, and their idea is to open up the center very quickly with the move d4. And in that case, white is trying to prove his better placed pieces in an open position. Well, this didn't happen because Nakamura played here the move knight takes b4, and now it's not a pawn sacrifice, as white gets the chance here to take on e5 with a knight. Materials even. Black goes for the move g6, hitting that knight in the center, and white anyway continues here with the move d4, supporting the knight, opening up the path for the bishop. Now the trick is that if you take on d4, let's say both knights are hanging in that case, but the trick is that white can actually insert the move bishop h6. That was Magnus his idea, and things are looking quite interesting for white. If you block with the bishop, you can take. You can even follow up with knight b5, and very soon the pawn on d4 will be regained. White retains very nice prospects in that case. Anyway, Nakamura not interested in that scenario. And look at this, guys. Here, you may not even notice it, but the king and rook, they are about to castle here. So they switch position. They end up on their normal squares, where they would also be placed in a normal classical game. Now the knight on e5 is still under some sort of an attack indirectly. So that means the knight goes to g4. And again, this is a remarkable situation, as the pawn on d4 can be taken. But if you do take with the bishop on d4, I'm pretty sure Magnus, his idea had been now to sacrifice the exchange and follow up with knight b5. And you can see when the queen comes to d4, there's even mating threats against that king, because the queen covers the entire long diagonal, and black is missing his dark squared bishop to guard his king. Nakamura understands that. He doesn't want to give up his main defender of the king. Goes for the move bishop to g7. And Magnus, again, has a lot of ideas. I do like bishop h6 to trade off that important defender. But Magnus takes on c5. Believes he is a pawn up in that case. But black is breaking free here with the move d7, d5. Adding pressure to the pawn on c4. But more importantly, opening up the path for the bishop, hitting that knight on g4. Knight h6 played, check. Again, black doesn't want to give up his bishop, goes for king h8. And now, very spectacular chess, guys, here. Look at this move, g4. What's the idea of this move? Well, first of all, the bishop from h1 is brought into play as quickly as it can. Also, the rook can join play very quickly. Bishop e6 was played to support the pawn. And, well, many options. I like a move like queen b2 to attack the knight. Pawn takes d5 was played, though. Knight takes d5. Bishop takes, bishop takes. Now, if you do take with a rook, that's not a good move. There's rook takes d5 and the knight on c3 cannot take on d5 because the queen on a1 is hanging. So therefore, bishop to b2, very nice idea. As here you see white is setting up a nice tandem on this diagonal, threatening to take the bishop on d5. Therefore, the bishop goes back to e6. Now the knight on h6 is in trouble. Here we see another purpose of that move g4 as the pawn goes to g5, supports the knight, and that knight, it can barely move, but it also keeps the king locked in the corner. Rook takes d1, queen takes d1. White is still a pawn up, but how is white going to coordinate his pieces, especially what you're going to do with the king? Are you going to keep it on f1, or are you going to castle anyway? Black is not doing too badly here. If Nakamura would have played b6, you can try to break free and try to trade off pawns. The pawn on c5 may be a very annoying pawn to reckon with. So in the game, Nakamura played it a bit slower. He played queen c8. He wants to win the pawn by attacking it with the queen. But now the rook comes into the game. Rook g3, excellent move. Queen takes pawn, knight e4, attacking the queen. Therefore no time to take the bishop on b2. And Nakamura goes for the move queen d5, moving the queen away, offering the exchange of queens. Maybe queens could have stayed on the board as well, but Nakamura wants to aim for simplifications. Queen takes queen, bishop takes back. And now look at this, knight f6. What a spectacular image with these two knights standing near the black king. Now things are not looking too bad for black. If you take on f6, cannot take with a pawn because the knight on h6 will be hanging. If you do take with the bishop, okay, game goes on. Things are not looking too bad. But how is white going to break through? That is the question which remains here. But Nakamura had a different idea. He played bishop takes pawn. Now the rook comes over to the a file to hit the bishop. The bishop goes back and the pawn on a7 is regained. And well, you don't want to lose this pawn. So Nakamura goes for the move knight d6, supporting the pawn on b7. f3 was played, and okay, now black, as I said, can barely move. I mean, king is stuck in the corner. These knights are really having a massive grip on black's king side. And what you would like to do here as black, in fact, is to play the move knight f5. This was not played, but let me show you one idea. If this would have been played, rook takes pawn. If you take on h6, g takes. Now you cannot take the pawn on h6 because it runs into knight d7 with discovered check. White is winning the exchange and the game. Now, in the game, we understand what's happening now better because white cannot make use of that trick. There followed here the move rook to c8. The rook goes to a safer square. So at the end of the day, there's no knight d7 with a discovered check. However, if Magnus would have been in tremendous shape, he would have understood that knight f5 is the threat, and he could have played e4, and there's no way to get rid of those two knights. If you ever take on f6, you take back with a bishop, and that is actually just checkmate. So you understand how dangerous the position is for black if e4 would have been played. But Magnus played bishop e5, looks also very nice. But now the knight comes to f5 anyway, and you have a threat here to take twice on h6, and there's no good discovered check. Knight takes f5 played. Here you can take with a pawn. You can also take with a bishop, which was played in the game. Rook takes pawn. Still, now the play has been restricted, limited to only one side of the board. And bishop e6 was played to defend the pawn. White is up a pawn, but is this going to be enough to win the game? Rook b4 was played in the game. You understand the idea is to go to h4, take the pawn on h7, and that would be a mating pattern with knight and rook. Bishop takes knight was played, bishop takes back, and it is opposite colored bishops, and this king cannot do that much, only can go to g8, king f2, rook c5, king g3, and what should black do? Well, you can also wait with your rook on the back rank. You're guarding the back rank together with rook and bishop. Is white able to break through eventually? That's not going to be simple. There are, of course, a lot of things to try here. This game can continue for 100 moves. White is definitely pressing here. But again, I'm not sure it's going to be enough. But when you're struggling with such position, the king on g8, that's the main problem. You always got to reckon with these back rank ideas. So it's in a way understandable that Hikaru tried to break free here with the move h6. If you do play h4 and exchange one pair of pawns, that would be a huge achievement for black. Trading more pawns will definitely help black to get closer to a draw. However, white can also take the pawn. G takes h6, king h7, attacking the pawn, and the bishop goes back. So now it is actually still 2 pawns. It's a very, very annoying pawn, but black goes for g5, trying to set up some sort of blockade on the light squares. Now Magnus played e4, grabbing space, but maybe, and that's what happened in the game, f5 is actually a very good move. You're offering the exchange of more pawns. Rook b7, setting up a discovered attack check against the king, like winning the rook in that case. But black goes for the move f4, looking for counterplay. The king has to go back. Rook c2 check, king goes even further back to e1. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the critical moment in the game where Hikaru Nakamura played here this move, bishop to a2. But why on earth would you play bishop a2? I think Hikaru didn't like the fact that his bishop is unprotected. So he felt like on a2, it's a much safer place. It's always protected by the rook. And if the bishop goes somewhere on this diagonal, you can take the pawn on h6. Bishop f8 is not such a big deal. However, bishop f8 was played in the game. And here Hikaru realized that he is actually completely lost. What is the thing here? Well, if you move your king, let's say to g6, there is rook g7. You cannot take the pawn on h6 because of rook c7 with a discovered check. Again, white is winning the rook. If the king goes to f6, now you would like to run up the board with your h pawn. But the problem is, and that is probably what had been overlooked by Hikaru, is that white can here play this move h4. That's an excellent move. If you start with h7, it's rook takes h2, and things are not that simple because the black rook is behind that passed pawn. It's covering the promotion square. But when you start with h4, now after g takes h4, h7, the rook is no longer able to control the promotion square. That wins the game for white. Of course, there are other moves as well. Instead of going to g6, you may consider going backwards to the back rank. However, let's say if you do play king to g8, there's h7 with check, and if you cannot take the bishop because you promote a pawn, you get a new queen. If you go king h8, bishop d6 with the idea to go to e5 is going to lead to checkmate as well. The alternative is to go with the king to h8, but now again, very nice move is this idea with h4 to sacrifice the pawn and prevent the black rook from getting behind on the h-file. G takes h4, bishop to d6, and nothing can be done against bishop e5. Let's say you push the pawn, bishop e5 check, king g8, h7, king goes away, you promote to a new queen, game over. What an incredible game. And well, let me just point out, by the way, that things would not have been that simple at all had Nakamura just captured the pawn on h2 instead of bishop to a2. This is a very important pawn. Now you see that all the threats are kind of neutralized and black has very good chances to save the game. What an incredible game. Big relief for Magnus to win game 1 of this super final freestyle chess in Paris, as the winner goes home with $200,000. That is something the guys are taking very seriously, of course. So let's see what is going to happen in game 2. of this final. Can Hikaru Nakamura bounce back? That is the big question. If so, there will follow a tiebreak. If not, Magnus can call himself the winner of this freestyle event in Paris. Thanks for watching. See you soon again.